Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Mastering AI for Content Governance. My name is Michael Lummus, and I lead strategy here at Aprimo. And today I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists, Microsoft Senior Cloud Solution Architect, Nicole Serafino, and Aprimo's Chief Product Officer, Kevin Souers. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items I'd like to go over. First and foremost, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to submit them in the question box. We'll make sure to either answer them at the end during the Q&A portion of the session, or we'll follow up via email after the session concludes. Second, please notice the resources document in the handout section of the webinar console. Here you'll find our three-part generative AI guidebook. There's info on Aprimo's content coach and a direct link to book a meeting with a Aprimo team member for any follow-up questions you may have. And lastly, if you can, stay to the end of the session and fill out our quick 3-question survey. We'd love to hear your feedback on how you feel the session went today. Without further ado, Nicole and Kevin, I'll hand it off to you to kick off our session. So welcome to the webinar and welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Michael. I'm looking forward to this discussion today. Sorry, I couldn't advance the slides. Obviously an important topic, but especially for the audience on the phone, generative AI is fundamentally life-changing over the coming months and the coming years to how we do our work. And what I mean by that is if you look at this visual depiction, this is one that we often use to describe Aprimo as a digital asset management system and as a marketing work management system. You know, content's the center of our world. But I would guess that most people looking at this, given that you're on this webinar, nodding their head going, yeah, that's kind of how my world looks too. And this is why we're kind of all in this together, this industry, because the reality is this content that we've been focused on for so long, centralizing it, managing it, governing it, making sure it's compliant, reusing it, lifecycle, all that content that we understand how to manage right is now the new big data. This is the gas of the generative AI engines, of the LLMs. And we'll talk about a little bit for a few minutes why that is, and then get into our discussion. You know, even Aprimo, who has a long history in AI, we're first to market many years ago with AI in the DAM industry. All of this existed long before Microsoft's announcement on January 23rd of their $10 billion investment into OpenAI. But even us as a leader, when that announcement happened, we kind of realized, wow, this is a game changer. We've been playing with OpenAI. We were familiar with it. It wasn't quite stable enough to be used for the type of customers that we service. You need reliability, you need stability. But all of a sudden on January 23rd, that all happened really, really fast. And it's big. It's one of those few technologies that hit not just at the enterprise. We've all been doing MarTech for a long time. And obviously it's mature, obviously it's used, but this is a consumer thing. My 75-year-old father uses OpenAI, and it's a human thing. I won't get into the story, but as we kind of tested these practices, these best practices on ourselves in the first half of 2023, we changed how even our internal operations worked at Aprimo, and that's the opportunity that exists for our customers. So many people think about generative AI and they go straight to content creation. And obviously that's going to be a powerful part of the future, but there's so much more that has to be considered. And paramount in that, and we'll talk about that today, is brand safety. This is an amazingly powerful technology, but it has to be used in a responsible way. But I mentioned that this is especially applicable to content folks. And the reason is there's a massive amount of VC money flowing in. There is 4,000 new AI tools in 2023 alone. And what these tools eventually, most of them are doing what we call vanilla GPT, the same thing you do with OpenAI, untrained, specific to your needs, but amazing LLM model. These other tools will figure out what Aprimo's figured out, and that is we can use the content to train GPT to harness this billions and billions of dollars of investment to help how we run our business specific to our business. And as these tools figure it out and market directly to your end users, because remember, this hits consumer too, those end users are going to start coming from the content and training these powerful tools themselves. And that's where it gets a little bit risky. If you're on this call, you know the importance of a closed ecosystem of managing content centrally. It represents your brand, it represents your compliance. And so with all these new technologies coming on, the possible, composable MarTech stack that you can build is more complex than ever. But the good news is more powerful. And this is where folks in content operations really have to take the thought leadership lead in their organizations so that this is captured the right way in the responsible way. What Aprimo did internally, we realized right away, it's not just about generation. It's not just hooking to GPT. Quite frankly, that takes 7 lines of code. We did it in an hour. It's about what you build around it. It's about making it work for your company. It's about doing so with brand safety and governance appropriately in place. And that's how you can start to reach that 25 to 50% capacity gain that Goldman Sachs says exists out there potentially for most white collar roles. And so our customers, the people on this phone, content operations executives, uniquely hold the keys to the future ways of working because you hold the content and you know how to manage the content. And that content is going to fuel these models. And even more exciting for all of us in the industry, these ways of working will be top priority. Go read your CEO's transcript with the last analyst call or ask about what the board asked. People making investments. In fact, 75% of VC investment in Q2 went into generative AI companies. Everyone's talking about it because they know there's something there, but they don't really quite know how to get started in a lot of cases. And that's the roadmap and the journey that we're taking with our customers and sharing with them, because we're all learning as we go here. So we'll talk today a bit about how you start with governance, and I'm not going to get into the detail here, but you also want to eventually get to the innovation, those trained models that we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of using your content to train GPT to do specific things for your company and start achieving those C-level benefits. This is a discussion I give with all of our customer executives. It's this, I'm giving you a brief version of a 75-minute executive briefing that we provide, but all of them kind of say the same thing. How do I even begin? And it's really some basic stuff. Start taking the leadership role in your companies. You are the content executives, you are the content experts, you are the technology experts, and start eating the elephant one bite at a time. Start talking about how you could use it, how are you going to govern it, and then all of a sudden start playing with it, seeing how you can train models. Your IT groups, I'm sure, have already worked on training models themselves, just like Aprimo delivers through their platform. It doesn't have to be with Aprimo, but you need to start somewhere. And this is the time to do it, because the winners and losers will be determined over the next 6 months, because those are the people that next year and the year after will really achieve the benefits. With that, I do want to hand it off to our partners at Microsoft, who have been with us every step of the way. And in fact, we made a case, and you'll hear from Nicole why, we delayed release of some of our features. And believe me, we wanted, and we were first to market, but we wanted to consume it not from OpenAI, but from Microsoft. And I think Nicole will share with you why that is.
Yeah, awesome, great. Thanks so much, Kevin. So I just want to talk a little bit about our partnership that we have with OpenAI. So OpenAI is the company that has founded and created ChatGPT, as well as some of these other large language models that we've been seeing kind of take the world by storm here. So Microsoft has invested into OpenAI to form this partnership to collaborate on the development of these AI technologies. So the partnership aims to accelerate the development of these advanced AI systems and ultimately bring the benefits of AI to more people. So as part of this partnership, Microsoft and OpenAI have agreed to work together in a couple key areas, which include developing these AI technologies, building an AI computing platform, advancing the AI research, with the ultimate goal of making that more accessible. So with this investment that has been made, this is allowing the company to use Microsoft Azure as its preferred cloud platform and allowing OpenAI to tap into the vast resources that Microsoft has to offer. So we can go to the next. So as part of this, their Azure OpenAI service has 4 main value pillars, which is to unlock new use cases, tailor to your needs, apply AI responsibly, and access enterprise-grade security. So the Azure OpenAI service is a platform offered by Microsoft as part of this partnership. The service aims to make it easier for developers and organizations to access these and use these advanced AI models and algorithms that have been developed by OpenAI. So it has a wide number of features, which includes this access to these pre-trained models. So developers can access and use these pre-trained AI models, such as ChatGPT, to add advanced capabilities into their existing or new applications. There's also tools for fine-tuning some of these models. So we can kind of adapt and fine-tune these pre-trained models to specific use cases. APIs for interacting with the models. So it's pretty consistent API for interacting with these, which makes it really easy for developers who may not even have any experience with AI or data science to integrate these models into their applications. And then as well as just some features that come along with using a service on Azure. So around scalability and reliability. So since the service is built on Azure, that means it's able to handle large amounts of data and traffic and is highly available and reliable. And then around security and compliance as well. So this service has been designed to meet a wide range of security and compliance requirements. And since it's built on Azure, it has several pre-built or built-in security and compliance features around that. So I think I hand it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Kevin. We're going to move into some discussion, and so you can start to drop questions in the chat. Before we do, we had a couple poll questions. So we'll push the first poll out just to get a sense of the audience today and where you guys are at. So first question is, where are you on the AI maturity curve? So please take a second to provide your input. We'll be able to see kind of how your peers in the call are also on the maturity curve here. So we'll give it a sec. All right, we'll close the poll. So this is probably what I would have guessed based on all the conversations that we're having. We have we're fairly early in the maturity curve as an industry here. A lot of new technology coming to bear, a lot of discussions around how to extract value from that in the optimal ways. And so we'll get into that in the discussion. This is good context as we kind of move into the discussion portion of the webinar. And we've got one more poll question. Let's go ahead and push that. So if that talks about, the first one was really about where you are today, where do you want to be? And your organization really, how is your organization viewing new technologies like generative AI? As an organization that leans in very receptively, actively pursuing those innovation opportunities, or is taking a more guarded approach to tech adoption of brand new technologies. All right, we've got a pretty good mix of moderately receptive is kind of the top of the curve here. So again, thanks for your participation in the poll. This will give us a lot of good context as we move into the panel. As we move into the panel, also wanted to welcome Jim Brennan to the stage. Jim joined us from Microsoft, where he's a data and AI specialist, and he'll be also helping field some of the questions that we've got today. So welcome, Jim. So the first question I want is probably the burning one we're hearing all the time, and that is, how do I start, and how do I start responsibly? Kevin, you hit on this a little bit earlier in your slides, but I think this is a very important question, and we see this in the poll results as well. So let's start there. Where do we start, and how do we do it responsibly?
Yeah, I wish it was more of a glamorous answer, but luckily it's a very approachable answer. We all want to run to the end game and have automatically generated content at scale, localized with generative AI, and obviously the appropriate review process is in place, because generative AI is not best suited to replace people, it's best suited to support people in what they do. So when you look at that kind of hairy end game and the journey that it takes to get there, people are getting overwhelmed a little bit. I just had the discussion yesterday where, a major company said to me, well, gosh, we're 3 years away from getting there. We We don't move that fast. We're in a compliant environment. But the reality is you do need to start moving. And so the approachable way to start is having formal discussions on what are the opportunities to use generative AI at scale, not as just POC, not just, oh, look, it helped me write my emails, or look, I clicked a GPT button in one of my systems and it rewrote, a description. Those are all well and good, but that's not how you get to 25 to 50% long-term that investors, that CEOs are going to be, that your boards are going to be looking for. How you get there is by asking yourself, what does the end game look like at our company? And what are the use policies? What are the considerations we have to think about? How you get more educated in thinking about those things is tinkering around, is playing, is hooking up to Microsoft GPT, or if you're an Aprimo customer, using the content coach, which essentially builds these models real time for you. And in doing so, you start to realize what it's good at and what it's not good. We have customers that come to us and say, hey, let's build a completely greenfield automatic content generation machine. And the visual part isn't really even there to get there yet, but you don't try to jump in that hard that fast. You just have to start. And then the opportunities, trust me, because we just went through this journey over the last 6 months, the opportunities start presenting yourself. So the key is to start more than, make sure you get it right.
The tried and true crawl, walk, run approach.
Exactly.
Nicole or Jim, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that familiarizing yourself with what is kind of generative AI and understanding its actual limitations, kind of like Kevin had touched on there. And then for the second part of your question of how to do it responsibly, I think that is really where understanding how generative AI works, to truly understand what are those limitations of these use cases that you are looking to implement with that, as well as utilizing some of the safety features that come along with the Azure OpenAI service, that helps to have a responsible implementation. Absolutely.
And then maybe as a follow-up there, we talk about the responsibleness. The impetus of those questions is often about risk, right? And what risk does my organization bear through some of these newer technologies that aren't necessarily always predictable and determinative out of the box. And so let's talk a little bit about perceived risk versus real risk. What are the real risks that you think that companies should be concerned about and have planned to make sure to responsibly adopt AI around?
Yeah, so some of the risks that come along with it, which comes along with just using generative AI in general, can be looking at making sure that the content it's creating is appropriate. So, these generative AI models may generate content that can be offensive, potentially politically biased, or otherwise objectionable. There's also, the chance that it can misinform a user. So making sure that we have something in check to verify that our answer is actually accurate, since this is just generating an answer for us. We always have to have those kind of safety measures in check for that. With that too, people always have like privacy concerns against that, but that's one of the reasons too why a lot of companies prefer to use Microsoft Azure OpenAI service versus OpenAI directly, is that you don't have to worry about your data being sent back to OpenAI. None of these models or data that's being sent or created through that is ever being used to create or train a new version of the model or anything. That will always stay inside of Microsoft for that. With that as well, there's some of those safety parameters there. There is like the content moderation and filters that are adjustable for different use cases, as well as various privacy policies, data handling that comes with Azure, and then just being transparent to users too about those limitations and the potential biases of AI, so that they can use it responsibly and make informed decisions.
Yeah, Kevin, I know this has been top of mind for you and your team as you've implemented some of these new large language models into the Aprimo application. So maybe talk a little bit about kind of how that affected kind of the choice to go with Microsoft, but also kind of how that's been implemented across the Aprimo platform.
Yeah, I mean, for us, and we've been a long time Microsoft partner, and so we were delighted that it was Microsoft that stepped up to make that investment. But for us, it was a no-brainer to go to Microsoft, and the reason really lies in global security. Microsoft, I say often, I think Microsoft's market cap is like 2.5 trillion. And when people ask, and rightfully so, hey, I hear stories about IP getting taken, and I hear stories of my data being used to train. I remind them that Microsoft has 2.5 trillion reasons to make sure that they maintain their reputation as the world's leading secure provider of enterprise technology. For us and for our customers, it's a better way to do it. We have validated environments, and those validated environments say keep it within the Azure boundaries. There's reasons for that for GDPR. There's reasons for that for compliance validations. And so for us, going to Microsoft was just not an option to do anything else. That being said, what we've learned in terms of using it, et cetera, because a lot of people, the risk, it's not just are they going to use my data to train, but the risk is what if it gives a bad answer? What if it hallucinates? And how can I count on it if it's only 90% accurate? And that's where I said earlier, there's hooking up to GPT, which is quite frankly easy to do. There's even training GPT models, which yes, it's really easy to do in Aprimo, but you don't need Aprimo to do it. Your technology team could probably play with it for a couple of weeks and figure it out well, or even faster. But then there's, then you're there, but then it's optimizing the results. It's ongoing management. It's not magic plug and play, and it's going to give you the best answers every single time. And that's why we're building out the tooling, and I know other companies at Microsoft is as well, for the concept of model owners, right? People who control individual GPT models and evaluate the results, continue to tweak it, continue to make it better. There has to be feedback mechanisms in there. There has to be measurement in there. And those are the tools when you put them in place, and you don't need them tomorrow. Like I said, this isn't, go start right away. This is start with your policies, start with your use cases, understand where your content is that could fuel these models. But eventually you're going to get to the point where you need to be having a mechanism where you build it yourself, or whether you use, packaged software to do so, to really maintain those models on an ongoing basis and evaluate those results. And that's where the magic starts to happen, because now you're with more confidence drilling these kind of savings, these kind of efficiencies, this level of quality. If you're a smaller company, you're able to fight above your weight. I might have had a 15-person marketing department now that can operate when you get there as a 40-person department. However, you do need to manage those risks along the way. And make sure you're optimizing the outputs, and it'll never end. These models, just like content itself, continue to evolve.
Yeah, Kevin, maybe one follow-up question for you. I know a lot of the audience today has experience in content governance. A lot of the Aprimo customer base is very well steeped in how you govern content long before ChatGPT became part of our day-to-day lexicon. And so what have you found so far in talking with customers and seeing how people are leveraging this, where the skills and those capabilities are transferable? And can you talk just a little bit about content governance from a bigger picture point of view, and how that's been impacted and will be impacted by the emergence of some of these large language models?
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty exciting, actually. So remember I said at the outset, everyone thinks of content as just content generation. Well, it writes something, well, it write my marketing plans, well, it write all my copy and all my tweets, and then I review them, and now I'm more productive. It actually does all do that. But where it gets really interesting is the more clever use cases that you can start to use that are really emerging in the industries. And for example, in pharmaceutical or financial services, where you have content approval processes for a reason, you have governance for a reason, whether it's the FDA or whether it's FINRA, whether it's just your brand compliance in general, even if you're a CPG company. By having processes historically in place to govern content, those processes themselves can be made more efficient by generative AI. It can help users as they create the content at the outset have a little angel on their shoulder of the final reviewer, reviewing it at the very earliest stages automatically so that you get higher quality content at the end of the approval cycle. The second line approvers that may be, medical doctors or lawyers or executives, whatever your industry can be, can also use that generative AI to do a first pass evaluation. And that evaluation can be around risk. It can be around tone voice. It can be multiple different evaluations specific to your company simultaneously. So when you have that embedded within your processes, now your processes themselves, and I've seen this in some POCs that weren't done by Aprimo, that were done by other people in the pharmaceutical industry, where they were able to reduce these approval process cycle times by 90%. And when you think of how expensive those second line reviewers are, to have AI routing to them only when it's appropriate or helping them review faster by saying, hey, you might want to take a closer look over here, that's a massive cost savings that's sure to get the C-level attention.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a good segue into the next topic I want to kind of tee up, which is around kind of the business value conversation. So maybe Jim, I'll pass this one to you. Yeah, as Microsoft's talking with a lot of the companies that you engage with out there, what types of business value are you seeing raised to the top as far as how people are thinking about the impact of generative AI and the impact that it will have from a top or bottom line or overall employee experience case with their business?
Yeah, so in some respects, it's across the board, right? And I don't, just to be very clear, I don't want to turn this into an advertisement for all the stuff that we do, right? But if you look at what we're doing, we're responding to where we find that there's interest in this, right? And so we're not only enabling it through custom development with ISVs such as Aprimo, right? But we're also imbuing it across, for example, our productivity stack, right? With a series of what we refer to as co-pilots. And so I think we're, fundamentally, right, the underlying business value, whether it's in, your scenarios or elsewhere, it's, for example, you guys are unleashing, content generation where it goes from being relatively scarce, difficult, expensive to, hey, we can do a lot more with a lot less. And I think that's really where a lot of the business value is, at least initially, is, how can we take use cases and accelerate the productivity of the end users, right? So that you, as you compete with other companies in your area, right, you can do more, you can transform and get better financial results ultimately. The biggest challenge, right, is some of those use cases are also a little squishy in the sense of, right, their productivity, right? How do we get users to be more productive? But there's a clear, there's a demonstrable history right here of being able to use AI and services that augment human capability to drive those efficiencies and productivity. So hopefully that's a useful line of thought for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And Nicole, I'd be curious to see if you've kind of seen any very specific examples. I'm not sure if you're able to share any kind of publicly known use cases or companies, or even if it's just some specific pilots that you've seen be extraordinarily successful. I'd be curious to kind of see what specific examples you could share of deployments.
Yeah, sure. So we have quite a few published customer stories. So from Grammarly, AT&T, CarMax, KPMG. Those are just some of the few that we already have out there. But the number one use case that we see time and time again is what's known as RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So this is a new approach to question answering that combines the strengths of extractive and generative question answering models. So when we use RAG, what it's actually doing behind the scenes of that is it's using a retriever to identify a relevant set of content or documents that has already been indexed, so it's searchable for us. So once it identifies those relevant documents, then we use the OpenAI model or ChatGPT to create an answer that is based off of those retrieved documents and the original question. So this is kind of a way of, I would say, it's almost like training your model, but it's really just around what we refer to as the prompt engineering, which is how we format our instructions for these models to adapt to our specific use cases for that. So when we kind of inject that specific information and tell the model, okay, now answer this question based specifically off of our own data and content that we have from there, that's what really helps us kind of reduce these hallucinations. And we give it that kind of that ground truth level for that then. That's definitely the number one use case that we see.
And I just want to point out one additional point relative to just make it super clear with what Nicole is saying, which is people worry about generative AI, right? Going back to the risk question, is they worry about, well, are we going to get answers that aren't relevant to our data? And this is the technique. So we point at your data sources, and this is ultimately, what you guys are doing as well, right? It's ensuring that the answers that you are getting with generative AI are specific to your data and not from sort of the broad ecosystem of the internet in general.
Yeah, Kevin, can you weigh in just a little bit around kind of how we've applied this approach within the Aprimo platform to make it kind of real for maybe Aprimo users?
Yeah, and again, I'm talking about Aprimo, but this will be common in the industry. We're first with it in the DAM and marketing workspace industry, but in general, the patterns they say are quite frankly exactly what we're doing for a big foundational piece of the platform. Where we have collections in the DAM, and if you have Content Coach turned on, when you pull content into those collections, the collections automatically train a GPT model based on that content. So all the power of that $10 billion investment in large language model and being able to talk articulately and analyze and summarize, but all focused, that canon focused on a group of specific assets for a specific activity for your company. And that power is amazing. All of a sudden you have an expert lawyer, expert senior marketer, expert copywriter, expert marketing planner, expert brand, all trained on your content for a specific task. And we give the ability for business users, because I like to make the joke, generative AI is the most left brain thing. It's all mathematical, right? And it's the most left brain thing invented by left brainers that can really only be leveraged appropriately and fully by right brainers. It's a tremendous irony. And so the future of marketing organizations, of content organizations, quite frankly, of all organizations, because this content, we're using it to enable sales, we're using it to onboard customers, specific use cases trained, all of them rely on a model owner that's a business person that has tools behind the scenes. They load the content, generates the model automatically, maybe 10 seconds, pretty close to real time. You can take content in, you can take content out, it'll regenerate the model. And then the business user has the ability to do something called prompt engineering, which is coaching the model based on feedback, based on someone says this answer is not very good. You can do the prompt engineering, speaking as a human, not code, and kind of coach the model to be better. We give you tools to actually do what's called few-shot learning. If it gives a bad answer, you say, hey, really quick, that's a bad answer. This is the right answer. You interact with it and you curate it as an extension of you or an extension of the activity, specific activity that you're trying to achieve. And once you have that foundation in place, whether it's Aprimo or anywhere else, when a new business case comes up, if you have the appropriate content, you could have a working GPT model focused on that specific use case, that specific business in a minute, in 1 minute. It's something. I've been in enterprise technology a long time, and I've never seen 1 minute time to value in my life.
It's really exciting. So I think we're about to transition into audience Q&A. So please have the questions coming in. We've gotten a couple already. I've got one more question. We'll do a round robin with the group, and then we'll jump into audience questions. And it's a broad question, but we'll maybe start with Jim, kind of go around the horn here. What's next? What does the future look like as it relates to AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like the world is your oyster, right? I think what is really exciting that I'm seeing, and again, I'm going to go back a little bit to that ecosystem that we're talking about, is you think about where people often work, right? So obviously we have lots of specialized tools out there, but lots of people, for example, in content generation work at times in Word or PowerPoint, or or communicate with peers through Teams and things like that, right? So where I think it's really exciting is we're building these co-pilots, right, to help augment the experiences and productivity of users in those tools. we also though have the capability to enable you to plug into a co-pilot, right? So that you can work in, let's say, you can work in an orchestrated manner with a co-pilot to not only, for example, coach the user on their grammar, what have you, but then apply a model that Aprimo might, bring by training with your customers, right, on their data to then make sure, hey, we could apply, brand voice to this or what have you, right, proactively, in the tool that they might be using at the time. So I think there will be transformative things that are really hard to guess at, but I think there are some really exciting incremental improvements that we can expect to see from these kind of integrations.
Absolutely. Nicole?
Yeah, so I think that these large language models and OpenAI have certainly changed the way that machine learning is currently being done. With that, I think we're going to see a lot more of these idea of the foundational models, which are the pre-trained models that we leverage, and kind of a little bit less of more of the traditional machine learning where we're training an algorithm to do a very specific task. And then with that, since we are leveraging these pre-trained models, and like Kevin said, we can get those working in like a minute for some specific use cases. Since it is so much easier to implement and so much less time to implement, I think that's definitely going to start becoming an expected user experience based off of the implementation that we've already seen a lot of companies be taking.
Kevin?
I say this a lot to our customer executives. It's so much more than just not what's just happening. Because remember, we run a software company, and obviously we're servicing it, but we run a business. We develop a certain way. We have marketing departments, sales departments, etc. And you look at what this means to the technology industry, to development of software. And I'm not just talking the co-pilot for coding. I'm talking once you put in large foundations of trained generative AI capability. For Aprimo, it's that ability to analyze a collection. We're now doing deeper dive on single asset. Once those foundations are in place, to Nicole's point, you can use business-oriented people to build specific functionality themselves. What that means is development of software. Anything built prior to 2023 is on some kind of life cycle toward deprecation at some point, unless it's refurbished. This is the new way of working. This is going to be a new relationship between customers and their software companies, where software companies are giving these foundational capabilities, consume this technology as right-brain business people, and then in a lot of cases, those right-brain business people are going to be the ones that configure the new features themselves. And it's just overwhelmingly exciting. And it sounds like Star Trek, but it's already here, and it's going to be the norm, a year, maybe 2 years from now. On top of that, a little selfish, and I'm always tweaking Microsoft on this a little bit, and other partners like Midjourney or Bria AI. I can't wait to visual to get to photorealism, right? The reality is a lot of the pure generative visual AI right now is not ready for prime time in terms of that photorealism bar. There's good touch-up tools using generative AI, but ground up, we all know it. They look a little artsy for a lot of the marketing that you need to do. But when that comes online, let's say in the next 12 months, to that photorealism bar and that ability to combine all the tooling, the analysis, the generation with the text-based LLMs that are already available, GPT, and combine that with the visual, and now you get to true automated content packaging. There will be a time where 30 to 40% of content generated will be programmatic. And that's not scary to the creative people, right? There's a famous adage already in the industry that says, you're not going to lose your job to AI, you're going to lose your job to someone using AI. And that's the reality. This will allow all individuals ultimately to be enabled to work on the higher end stuff. Not all content experiences are created equally. Programmatic is an acceptable thing for some interactions, as long as it's governed well, as long as you understand where that's occurring, as long as it's in a closed loop ecosystem, as long as you're tagging your AI generated assets, because believe me, your board's going to ask you how much are you doing with AI constantly. Sorry, that is the future. We're all sitting in an industry, because this landed square in our lap, where we're going to see just massive, massive change over the next 2 years, which is why we're telling our customers, go grab the thought leadership mantle at your company, be the leader, start somewhere, don't wait for it to happen to you.
Awesome. Thanks all. We've got some really good questions coming through the chat here. There's a handful that talk about security, so maybe we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into security. Specifically, what happens? How do you manage around somebody putting sensitive data into the prompts, and risk around that? What if a model has access to sensitive data and you need to manage which users have access to that model? Can we just talk a little bit more about kind of data and information security as it relates to deploying these types of capabilities?
If I could hit that first, Microsoft's going to tell you they don't use your data to retrain, and that's true because, by the way, retraining costs over $1 billion. It's not like they're retraining this thing. There's a reason GPT right now is to information through 2021, and we've said the future is not necessarily of marketing and content is not vanilla GPT. It's your trained models. So the question is, when I'm putting sensitive content in there and I'm training my model, what happens to that? That data and how we implement it, and I assume most providers, is yours. It's not going anywhere. It is your specific models and it exists as long as you want it to exist or that you're on the Aprimo platform. It is not getting sent to some kind of centralized, place where it's retraining bigger models for the rest of the world. But I know people are nervous, and rightfully so, and I've had long conversations where I've had to answer that question the same time 6 times in a row. Ask in a different way. That is a legitimate concern. One of the reasons we go with Microsoft. But in terms of the content access, I love that someone asked that question, right? That's kind of our whole point to our customers. A model trained on content should have the same security rights as the content that fed it. And we understand security rights, us, the collective us in the industry, not just Aprimo, everyone. We know about digital rights management. We know about content lifecycle and expiration. We know that only some people should get access to some content. So the minute you separate your generative AI models, trained models, from your content management with people outside of our industry who don't understand or appreciate the importance of that security, and they're making models based on secure, limited access content, you've essentially opened that content to the entire world that has access to that model within your company. Think about it as transitive property. And so this is why we as content leaders have to be part of the leadership at our companies, because this is coming and you're going to have salespeople saying, just give me the content, we can make more money, get ahead of it. Make sure you have control. Talk about how this is going to happen, because your content could be spread to the wind and everything you worked on the last 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, 20 years could be lost really quickly. So this is an industry imperative for us, for Aprimo as a company, for our customers, and most likely anyone on this call, because you're interested in content, it's time to get going. I don't care if you do it with Aprimo or somewhere else. We want to establish that the content operations leaders are the thought leaders that should be driving this.
And I'd like to call it up as well, and just double down on the technical side of it. Not only, right, do we not, your data is your data. We don't look at your data, but in terms of it's encrypted. What Aprimo is built in the cloud, and what we recommend for all of the companies we work with, it's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted in transit. You have keys that that provide your control over managing your data. And then there are also things like the ability to do dynamic data masking, right? So that you limit any sensitive data that might be in a prompt, and there's a lot of things that you can do, right, to make sure that they're encrypted. If there is data in there, and that, like I said, that data is masked or what have you, so that users don't have access to data they should not have access to.
Awesome. Another question that's around the same area of kind of risk management is around IP and licensing. And so, how do you get your hands around kind of the IP risk of licensed content and content being used in licensed appropriate ways?
I'll hit that. I mean, it goes with the original, statement that obviously we understand in the industry, those on the phone, the importance of IP management, license management, et cetera. But even beyond that, you're absolutely right. AI using your IP to generate new imagery, that traceability is critical. In fact, Aprimo over the next probably 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be introducing automatic AI detection as one aspect of the program. You need to manage integration and orchestration with all these future AI tools that, we're not telling you not to use the other tools or not to use AI. We're saying do so in a closed loop ecosystem. So that means if you integrate for your industry the next whiz bang, just about to be invented generative AI creative tool that makes perfect things for your industry, that's wonderful, adopt it, but hook it into some centralized place so that you know where the AI generated content or influence content is occurring, and you're putting tracers and trackers on it. And finally, the White House, along with a lot of the big plumbers, Microsoft included, is working toward developing IP standards, traceability standards, and we're following that closely and absolutely will match those standards and make them available. And that's important, whether you're using Aprimo or anything else, keep an eye on those standards. It's a very real concern, but also one that can be managed if you're managing the overall process. Believe it, this person's question is absolutely right. AI in the hands of all of the company to be wild, wild west and do what they think because they now have their magic tool and they think they can be a content author, and maybe they can, but they're doing it, as a skunk works, not visible to us. That's a problem. You're absolutely correct. It's fixable, but it has to be consciously fixed and thought of up front.
Yep, and making sure that that content is curated for access to the models with relation to its license purpose is also a good way to handle that.
Yeah, the good
All right,
news
I
is
think
AI itself gives you.
we're just about at time. We've got one last question we'll throw out here, and then we'll wrap. And other questions we'll make sure to follow up with folks via email afterwards. The last question is around, I guess, directed to Kevin again here. What is Aprimo looking to do around AI detection? What different approaches are available there? And how do we anticipate keeping up with all the generative AI tools themselves?
Yeah, I think I already hit on it. It's a multifaceted thing. I know I did a quick flip at the beginning because I didn't want this to be an Aprimo commercial, but there is a number of world-class processes that are already been identified to kind of manage your governance. That starts with AI content detection, right? We believe that's going to have to be a standard part of every centralized digital asset management system and AI infrastructure. Know that you have it. And by the way, that's not a negative. It's not like the teachers trying to catch the cheaters in high school with their AI detectors. It's just a matter of knowing. You need to know, and if you're a CMO, your board will ask you because they want to hear that you're using AI to generate content. They're not scared of it. They're motivated by funny things like profit and expense and growth rate, right? They want to hear that CMOs are using, that CIOs are creating and leveraging this investment that Microsoft, OpenAI, so many have put together, that this $10 billion investment is getting put to use for us, for our company. And you'll want to brag, you'll want to detect the AI, you want to show the AI because you want to see how you're using it. And then the board may ask, or the CEO may ask, or the stock analyst may ask, well, that's great, you're getting all this productivity and quality out of AI, but what are you doing about it? Like, isn't that risky? Isn't that scary? Aren't you going to ruin the company? And if you can answer, if your CEO can answer and she can say, we have a world-class governance program in place that includes AI content detection, traceability, closed loop tracking, other exciting things that we're building, and the industry is building, that CEO is going to be pretty happy. And that's the thing. This is an opportunity for us to align to the top priorities of the company as content operators. But it's because we think about the risk ahead of time and we take control ahead of time.
All right. Well, that's unfortunately all the time we have. I think it's been a really great discussion. I want to thank our panelists, Kevin, Nicole, Jim. Thank you for all of your inputs. If you want to learn more, there are a series of the Aprimo Generative AI guidebook. You can scan the QR code to get to it. There's also resources in the handout section of the webinar. I want to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully this has been valuable to you. Please give us your feedback. We're eager to hear it through the post-webinar survey. And once again, thanks for your attendance. Have a good one. Bye.